What's up, everybody? Trinity here. Welcome back to the Second Street Marvel. Let's go ahead and get right into today's history lesson. It's Sunday, so I guess we're going into history. You know, Egyptian culture and all the history and everything there has always kind of really interested me and intrigued me since I was a little kid. Now, it's something I've also never really spent enough time researching or anything like that, but I will say that it certainly seems like the Marvel Cinematic Universe here has somewhat kind of been making me go back and look at our actual history in order to look forward into the future of the MCU for some predictions, things that I may have seen in the movie The Eternals. And we'll go ahead and get right into some of that stuff here in just a second. I want to thank you all so much for being here today. Make sure that if you like what you're seeing in this video, make sure that you hit that like button, share this video out with your friends so they can come here and hang out and listen to me flap my gums about other theories just like this, and theories that you're going to hear before Eric Voss goes out there and hears my theories and steals them. I've been dropping him hints though, so maybe he'll eventually hear what I have to say. He'll be the one to put it on the big stage, right? The other day I was over on the Den of Nerds. I was talking with Josh. He had his call-in show on Friday, and I actually talked a little bit about some of what we're going to be getting into here today. So make sure that you're here for that. It's gonna be fun. Like I said, this is stuff that definitely interested me as a kid, just like thinking about some of these things. But especially then when we get into not even only from the Eternals, where they had all that kind of that culture there that they showed in that film, but then we get into things like a Moon Knight, which was really intriguing to me as well. And a lot of this kind of leaves me feeling a little bit unfulfilled because they do these things, they've teased these things, but they haven't really done much with them yet. You know, we could sit here and we could chop it up all day about Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how it just seems to hit a little bit different than the previous 3 phases have, and I think that's for a reason. I believe one of the things they've been doing is expanding the universe, as well as doing the things that they need to plant seeds out there for upcoming films, just like they did with the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the first couple of phases, where you get all these individual movies, but then they leave these little Easter eggs, maybe these open ends, or how would you say, maybe even these plot holes that lead us into other things later. You know, it's funny about plot holes. They're like, this is a plot hole. Like, well, maybe it's just something left for later. But we'll see. We'll get into that. I think there's legitimate plot holes that people have out there, but we'll see. We'll see. But let's go ahead and get into this. Now, if you remember back to the Eternals film, there was this particular scene. And the interesting thing about the Eternals film, if you go watch the movie and look at actual history, world history, in the times that they were at, they actually arrived. Well, I think in I can't remember. Was it like 5000 BC when they arrived in Mesopotamia. And this, it's very interesting. Mesopotamia, you go back into history and look at things like that. And this is basically the birthplace of civilization, where people first started growing crops. They first adopted a calendar, and they started to live in a somewhat civilized manner and society. They started to set down certain laws and things like that. A whole bunch of things that happened right there at the birthplace of civilization. And if you watch the movie, they kind of go through at different times during this. They arrived in Mesopotamia. Later, we actually see them in Babylon. And then later, we actually see them in Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan? Mexico. Not New Mexico. I almost said New Mexico, but Tenochtitlan, Mexico, which is very interesting because this is the place. Tenochtitlan, Mexico, is basically where kind of the Aztec society lived. And in this particular town, there is some history revolving around it that is very interesting, that I've actually covered here in another live stream before, that I believe actually teases the roots, the history of Namor in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We do know that Kevin Feige somewhat confirmed that they are changing his background from being from Namor being in Atlantis to being from Aztec, or like in this town of Tenochtitlan, the Aztec culture. And it's very interesting how that's going to play out, especially when I started looking into this thing here of the Emerald Tablet, something that was actually mentioned in the Eternals movie when MAKKARI is there and they're partying in Babylon. As we see, that Sprite was there telling this little story about some of the adventures that the Eternals had been on, and how the humans are going to go on our own adventures and become our own heroes. Very interesting stuff if you look at some of the people that they're talking about in that scene, as well as things that happen subsequently right after, as they are there in Babylon. And you see MAKKARI arrive, and she arrives to talk to these two guys, and she has these artifacts that she gathered to trade for information from these two guys. And these guys, they reach for this particular looking little kind of Ushabti, which I've talked about before, look like to be like an Ushabti, or definitely a statue in memory to a man named Sholgi. And I kind of went over that before as well. But she was there asking these guys about information on the Emerald Tablet. Now, the interesting thing is what you get when we get into the Emerald Tablet and exactly what it is. I've spent some time just kind of researching here on YouTube and getting on Wikipedia a little bit, just looking up, well, the internet, and a lot of it ultimately leads to Wikipedia. But just looking at some of these things, even just at a glance, to see what we can get from out of the Eternals film and what we could be getting in some of these other movies. I do strongly believe that the Eternals set up plenty of this technology that we're getting in Phase 4, as well as possibly even things that affect what we got in the first 3 phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, when we start talking about the Infinity Stones, exactly what they are, what they were, the Gauntlet, and all of these different kinds of things. How that gauntlet was forged. It's very interesting when you get into this particular thing that was actually talked about in the Eternals, when MAKKARI is asking for information about the Emerald Tablet, to which these two men she's talking to, they say that the Emerald Tablet isn't real. It's just a myth. But is it? I don't know. Let's go ahead. Let's get in here and listen and check out and see exactly what is the Emerald Tablet. And this is something I've really liked about this Phase 4 stuff, and getting into the Eternals and watching. I've kind of watched it several times. Is like, it's making me want to go in and read some of this history of stuff that I was always kind of intrigued with in the first place. And you can do the same thing yourself. I would highly suggest going and looking up some of this stuff. Go back and watch the Eternals. I'm telling you, they are basically there at the birthplace of civilization, human history, going up through the current history. Very interesting stuff, especially considering what we see MAKKARI do, or not MAKKARI at this point. This would have been all of a sudden I'm forgetting her name. That when Cersei, at the very beginning of the movie, when they arrive on Earth, we see Cersei go up to that dagger and she grabs it and turns it to a golden dagger. Very interesting when you get in here and we start looking at what the Emerald Tablet is. But enough flapping my gums. Let's go ahead and get right into here. But like I said, go do some research. Watch some of these films again. Watch some of the... You know what? As a matter of fact, watch all these films again. And start to form some of your own theories. Here we go. Getting into the Emerald Tablet. And yes, I'm on Wikipedia here reading this. Right here. The Emerald Tablet, also known as the Smaragdine Tablet, or the Tabula Smaragdina, is a compact and cryptic hermetic text. It is highly regarded by Islamic and European alchemists as the foundation of their art. Though attributed to the legendary Hellenistic figure Hermes Trismegistus, some of these words, the text of the Emerald Tablet first appears in a number of early medieval Arabic sources, the oldest of which dates to the late 8th century or early 9th century. It was translated into Latin several times in the 12th and 13th centuries. Numerous interpretations and commentaries followed. Medieval and early modern alchemists associated the Emerald Tablet with the creation of the Philosopher's Stone and the artificial production of gold. It has also been popular with 19th and 20th century occultists and esoterics, among whom the expression "as above, so below," a modern paraphrase of the second verse of the tablet, has become an often cited motto. Very interesting that, especially if you've been reading any of the current X-Men books and things like that, especially like Excalibur. But before, I want to read through some of this before we go into looking at some of the different things here regarding the Emerald Tablet. And this is kind of a depiction, an imaginative 17th century depiction of the Emerald Tablet. So let's go ahead and get into a little bit more of this. Textual history. The tablet states its author as Hermes Trismegistus, a legendary Hellenistic combination of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god of Thoth. Pretty sure that's Thoth. I think that first H is silent. I could be wrong. It could be Thoth. I'm pretty sure it's Thoth. Like most other works attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, the Emerald Tablet is very hard to date with any precision, but generally belongs to the late antique period between 200 and 800. I'm guessing that's AD, BC. I don't know. It says I don't. You feel free to correct me. The oldest known source of the texts is the Sir Alkalika Wasantala. Like I can't say that. Or it says the secret creation of the art of nature, or the Book of Causes, an encyclopedic work on natural philosophy falsely attributed to Apollonius of Tyana. This book was compiled in Arabic in the late 8th or early 9th century, but it was most likely based on much older Greek and or Syriac sources. In the frame story of the Sir Allah Kala, forgive me, tells his readers that he discovered the texts in a vault below a statue of Hermes in Tyana, and that inside the vault an old corpse on a golden throne held the Emerald Tablet. Slightly different versions of the Emerald Tablet appear in the second book of the Element of the Foundation, attributed to Jabir ibn Hayyan, in the longer version of the Secret of Secrets, and in the Egyptian alchemists Ibn Umayl's book on the silvery water and the starry earth. The Emerald Tablet was first translated into Latin in the 12th century by Hugo Santalla as part of his translations of the Sir al-Khalika. And they basically go on here and they're telling about, there are differences here of the Emerald Tablet and the translations here. And it goes through all of these, and we can go through like this very first one here. It says the translation of the Emerald Tablet is truth, certainty, that in which there is no doubt. That is that which is above is from that which is below, and that which is below is from that which is above, working the miracles of one thing, as all things were from one. Notice one is capitalized. Its father is the sun, and its mother the moon. The earth carried it in her belly, and the wind nourished it in her belly, as earth which shall become fire. Feed the earth from that which is subtle, with the greatest power. It ascends from the earth to the heaven, and becomes ruler over that which is above and that which is below. So if you go in here and you look at all these, even all these different translations, what you essentially get is that it's basically a philosophy, as well as not only is it a philosophy, but basically also talking about like transcendence. Here is kind of what I take out of that, and like also if you think about like the yin yang, right? The yin and the yang, and then you've got the little dot in each one. As above, so below, and how one affects the other. One is the other. It's about the good and the bad. It's about the positive and the negative. It's about alkaline and non-alkaline, which would essentially be toxic, right? It's it's basically about those kinds of things, and how like basically transcending as well, becoming part of the above and the below. That's just, if you ask me, that's what I take out of that, right? And ultimately it's telling me like do better. You can be a better person, but to do that you basically have to look inward unto yourself, not outward into everything else. The outward is what affects that. Maybe I could be crazy, right? I could be crazy. And then go in here and talk about the influence and in popular culture, how it is. But let's go ahead. I'm going to get here into the chats and see what you guys are talking about. And then we'll get into a little bit more of this emerald tablet and exactly what it is and what it means. Okay, so now I've kind of told you what the emerald tablet is. If you go through and, as I said, you watch the Eternals, the emerald tablet was brought up when MAKKARI is she's looking for this tablet, which this tablet is basically just these texts that basically describe that as above, so below, born of the earth, you can basically transcend and become a god and rule over all, is kind of what it's saying. But in order to do that's the thing, is everything that it kind of the reflection of what it's saying is it all comes down to you, the individual, and looking inward and all of that stuff. So it's saying, as it said right here, the medieval and early modern alchemists associated the emerald tablet with the creation of the philosopher's stone. Now, I never watched Harry Potter, but it's probably mentioned in there. But let's get in here and see first what is an alchemist, right? Alchemy is an ancient branch of natural philosophy, a philosophical and proto-scientific tradition that was historically practiced in China, India, and the Muslim world and Europe. In its Western form, alchemy is first attested in a number of pseudepigraphical texts written in Greco-Roman Egypt during the first few centuries AD. Alchemists attempted to purify, mature, and perfect certain materials. Common aims were chrysopoeia, the transmutation of base metals into noble metals, particularly gold and silver, I believe, as well. The creation of an elixir of mortality, and the creation of panaceas, able to cure any disease. The perfection of the human body and soul was thought to result from the alchemical magnum opus, or the great work. The concept of creating the philosopher's stone was variously connected with all of these projects. Islamic and European alchemists developed a basic set of laboratory techniques, theories, and terms, some of which are still in use today. They did not abandon the ancient Greek philosophical idea that everything is composed of 4 elements, and they tended to guard their work in secrecy, often making use of ciphers and cryptic symbolism. In Europe, the 12th century translations of medieval Islamic works on science and rediscovery of Aristotelian philosophy gave birth to a flourishing tradition of Latin alchemy. The late medieval tradition of alchemy would go on to play a significant role in the development of early modern science, particularly chemistry and medicine. Modern discussions of alchemy are generally split into an examination of its exoteric practical applications and its esoteric, spiritual aspects. Despite criticisms by scholars such as Eric J. Homeyard and Marie-Louise von Franz that they should be understood as complementary. I don't know what happened there. As complementary. The former is pursued by historians of the physical sciences who examine the subject in terms of early chemistry, medicine, and charlatanism, and the philosophical and religious texts in which these events occurred. The latter interests historians of esotericism, psychologists, and some philosophers and spiritualists. The subject has also made an ongoing impact on literature and arts. So basically, the alchemy is where they are trying to change base metals into gold, silver, things like that. Basically, upgrade them. Also, trying to create this elixir of life that will possibly grant one cure disease and possibly grant immortality. That's what like the point of the alchemy is. Now, if you think about it, they even said in there that it has to do with a lot of modern, basically modern science. Is like what a lot of it is based off, particularly chemistry and medicine, right? Trying to cure those afflictions and things like that. So that's basically where we're getting the alchemy in. And now that is what leads to the Philosopher's Stone. Because it says medieval and early modern alchemists associated the Emerald Tablet with the creation of the Philosopher's Stone and the artificial production of gold. Now it's very interesting when we look at these things and kind of what I've talked about with regard to Cersei, when the Eternals arrived on Earth in the film, they arrived and she changed that dagger that the kid was using when he was gutting that fish and to eat it and everything. She changed it with her hand. She picked it up and changed it into gold. We look at the technology that the Eternals are using, and they are essentially robots that were created by the Celestials. They're made of like this golden looking technology. But regardless of all of that, we're also talking about alchemy here and what they're trying to create, this elixir of life, but also this Philosopher's Stone, which we will get into here in just a second, in which is this Philosopher's Stone is what changes those base metals into gold, into silver. It also is like this liquid that will heal you, possibly grant you immortality. So very interesting with regard to some of those kinds of things. Now let's get in here and look at, and that's kind of the interesting thing about the alchemy when we look at that is that that's essentially what Tony Stark is doing, right? Like the science and everything that he's kind of doing and taking, when we've got, like, if you take a look at vibranium, like we have in the MCU, where did that vibranium really come from? How did it get there? Was it just that stone that arrived in, like, that comet that arrived on Earth? I'm telling you, we'll get into some more of this stuff. So what is the Philosopher's Stone? Okay. The Philosopher's Stone, or more properly, Philosopher's Stone, is a mythic alchemical substance capable of turning base metals such as mercury, a liquid metal, into gold or silver. It is also called the elixir of life, useful for rejuvenation and for achieving immortality. For many centuries, it was the most sought goal in alchemy. The Philosopher's Stone was the central symbol of the mystical terminology of alchemy, symbolizing perfection at its finest, enlightenment, and heavenly bliss. Efforts to discover the Philosopher's Stone were known as the magnum opus. Kind of like this whole theory that I've got with the Eternals and the MCU is my magnum opus. Okay, it says the history. The earliest known mention of the Philosopher's Stone is the Chirok Meta by Zoismos of Panopolis around circa 300 AD. Alchemical writers assign a longer history. Elias Ashmole and the anonymous author of Gloria Mundi, 1620, claim that its history goes back to Adam, who acquired the knowledge of the stone directly from God. This knowledge was said to be passed down through biblical patriarchs, giving them their longevity. The legend of the stone was also compared to the biblical history of the Temple of Solomon and the rejected cornerstone described in Psalm 118. Interesting, right? Interesting. The theoretical roots outlining the stone's creation can be traced back to Greek philosophy. Alchemists later used the classical elements concept of Amina Mundi and creation stories presented in texts derived from a common source or prima materia, first matter, associated with chaos. Prima materia is also the name alchemists assigned to the starting ingredient for the creation of the Philosopher's Stone. The importance of the philosophical first matter persisted throughout the history of alchemy. In the 17th century, Thomas Vaughan writes, "The first matter of the stone is the very same as the first matter of all things." Middle Ages. Early medieval alchemists built upon the work of Zoismos in the Byzantine Empire and the Arab empires. Byzantine and Arab alchemists were fascinated by the concept of metal transmutation and attempted to carry out the process. The 8th century Muslim alchemists Jabir ibn Hayyan, Latinized as Gerber, analyzed each classical element in terms of 4 basic qualities. Fire was both hot and dry, earth cold and dry, water cold and moist, and air hot and moist. He theorized that every metal was a combination of these 4 principles, 2 of them interior and 2 exterior. From this premise, it was reasoned that the transmutation of one metal into another could be effected by the rearrangement of its basic qualities. This change would be mediated by a substance which came to be called zerion in Greek and al-kisir in Arabic, from which the word elixir is derived. It was often considered to exist as a dry red powder made from a legendary stone, the Philosopher's Stone. The elixir came to be regarded as a crucial component of transmutation by later Arab alchemists. In the 11th century, there was a debate among Muslim world chemists on whether the transmutation of substances was possible. A leading opponent of the Persian polymath Avicenna, who discredited the theory of the transmutation of substances, stating, "Those of the chemical craft know well that no change can be effected in the different species of substances, though they can produce the appearance of such change." According to legend, the 13th century scientist and philosopher Albertus Magnus is said to have discovered the Philosopher's Stone. Magnus does not confirm he discovered the stone in his writings, but he did record that he witnessed the creation of gold by transmutation. So it's very interesting. We go in here, reading in here about the Philosopher's Stone and exactly what it does. Now, one interesting thing I do want to bring up is here at the beginning of the Middle Ages, right here, where it says the early medieval alchemists built upon the work of Zoismos of the Byzantine Empire, in the Byzantine Empire and the Arab empires. I think that's very interesting because in Ms. Marvel, they actually mentioned in history class when they were getting up, Nakia, Kamala Khan's friend, mentioned, they spend all this time talking about this history, but they just bypassed the Byzantine, and she said something else as well, right there. And it's like, interesting, right? We're talking about the Philosopher's Stone, and we're talking about this. We also go, what was it about Zoismos of Panopolis? Zoismos of Panopolis was a Greco-Egyptian alchemist and Gnostic mystic who lived in the end of the 3rd and beginning of the 4th century AD. He was born in Panopolis and flourished in Panopolis, present-day Arkham in the south of Roman Egypt, and flourished is circa 300. I'm guessing that's AD. He wrote the oldest known books on alchemy, in which he called Chirok Meta, using the Greek word for things made by hand. Pieces of this work survive in original Greek language and translations into Syriac and Arabic. He is one of the 40 authors presented in a compendium of alchemical writings that was probably put together by in Constantinople in the 7th or 8th century AD, copies of which exist manuscripts in Venice and Paris. Stephen of Alexandria is another. And it kind of goes on to explain exactly who this guy was. But it's very interesting because, like, this Philosopher's Stone and exactly what it does. You know, it's can change base metals into gold or silver. So like, I think about changing base metals into gold or silver, and I think, what could, like, this thing, if this Philosopher's Stone exists, what could it turn gold or silver into then? If it can change base metals into, like, if it can upgrade, what can it do with gold and silver then? If you're not changing something into that, like actual, but it's very interesting how we're talking about these changing of things, this transmutation. A lot we could take from that if you think about it. But it's also called the elixir of life, useful for rejuvenation and immortality. So not only are we talking about this stone being able to, this stone can not only change base metals and upgrade them into gold or silver, but it can grant you, it can rejuvenate you, and it can grant you immortality. Now, I could be crazy, but does that not sound like the attributes of a particular character we know out there? Maybe that can rejuvenate himself and heal at an exponential rate, who is immortal, and who maybe has his bones covered in metal. Now, I don't know. It could just be me. But we've got that. And then you get in here into, like, the elixir of life. The elixir of life. Let's talk. What is the elixir of life? This is coming off of here at the Philosopher's Stone. Is also called the elixir of life. The elixir of life is also known as the elixir of immortality, and sometimes equated with the name of the Philosopher's Stone. Is a potion that supposedly grants the drinker eternal life and or eternal youth. The elixir is also said to cure all diseases. Alchemists in various ages and cultures sought the means of formulating the elixir. History. Mesopotamia. Wow, that's crazy. That's pretty crazy, right? Mesopotamia. Like, I could be wrong here, but we're talking about the Philosopher's Stone changing base metals into gold and silver. We've seen that Circe literally came up, grabbed that dagger, turned it into a golden dagger. They arrived, and that was in Mesopotamia in 5000 BC. Right? In 5000 BC, Mesopotamia, when she did that. Very interesting. Very interesting. We're talking about this, and later they're searching for the Emerald Tablet, which talks about all this. But okay, so we're getting into Mesopotamia history. Mesopotamia. An early mention of an elixir of life is found in the Epic of Gilgamesh. wasn't Gilgamesh in? He was the the punchy guy. And anyway, um, uh, found in the Epic of Gilgamesh, in which Gilgamesh comes to fear his own declining years following the death of his beloved companion Enkidu. He seeks out Utan Fistum, Fishtim, a Noah-like figure in Mesopotamian mythology, in which he was a servant of the great alchemists of the rain, who later became immortal, to seek out the advice of the king of Herod of the land of fire. Gilgamesh is directed by him to find a plant at the bottom of the sea, which he does, but seeks first to test it on an old man before trying it himself. Unfortunately, it is eaten by a serpent before he can do so. Many rulers of ancient China sought the fabled elixir to achieve eternal life. During the it goes on here to talk about China and India, Europe and Japan. But it's very interesting. We're talking about Gilgamesh here. He was actually in the Eternals movie, and Enkidu was actually mentioned there as well. When we seen that Enkidu was mentioned from Sprite when she talked about Gilgamesh and Enkidu and how they when they were heroes, and how humans would go on to become heroes of our own and become go on our own journeys. But then you go in here and you read a little bit about Enkidu and exactly what was going on here. Now, I don't really have any more time to go into any more of this on this stream, but I just think it's very interesting where we're getting into actual history. Now, some of this history isn't all proven. A lot of it is, same as what we're talking about here with the MCU. A lot of it has these connections and things that have somewhat proof of, that they don't actually have all the proof of. Some of these legends, these myths, this lore that we're talking about here, we're talking about the Emerald Tablet, transcending, looking into oneself and becoming godlike, is essentially what it's talking about here. Transcending, having the elixir, the Philosopher's Stone, changing base metals and upgrading them into better metals, the elixir of life, granting immortality. So when you get in here and read into some of this history, a lot of this stuff is very interesting, considering we did see a lot of this stuff teased in the Eternals movie. I do believe that we've got in that movie, and through reading some of this stuff, we do obviously see talking about the Emerald Tablet, getting into like the alchemy. This all has stuff to do with chemistry and modern science and medicine. That's exactly what we're talking about here. We're talking about super soldier serum. We're talking about Tony and his nanites in his suit, him recreating that new element that Dr. Arnim Zola did. That's what we're talking about here. They're also talking about one of these other things we get into is where they are taking things basically made of found in not natural things, created and recreating them, that natural effect still, which is kind of what all of this is based off of. If you go back and you look at those the 10 rings that Shang-Chi has in the Shang-Chi and the Legend of the 10 Rings movie, they didn't know what they were made of. Made of some sort of technology they had no clue. These golden rings. I do believe that they are actually maybe based on this same thing. You look at the if you look at the bangles that Ms. Marvel has, it's very interesting too. There's more things that I have to go in here too, to where you actually see one of the things they mention in talking about some of this stuff is about, I believe, the Philosopher's Stone, is it actually can create a glass-like substance, a glass or crystal-like substance, which is very interesting because that's what we see those bangles in Ms. Marvel do. If you go through and you watch Moon Knight, We're talking about the Ennead, the 10 gods that they had there. We had 10 Eternals arrive on Earth. I don't think that's any coincidence. But then you also look at the fact that they are looking into this Egyptian mythology. They're after these Ushabtis. They're after all of these different things, these different artifacts that were there at the birthplace of civilization, things that we actual humans have discovered as part of our actual human history. If you look at the Eternals, they also are in Tenochtitlan, Mexico, where was this Aztec god that was actually mentioned in the Moon Knight series. It was the moon god, as a matter of fact. Mentioned in the Moon Knight series. And it was in the town where it was basically an ancient Aztec town. And I don't think it's any mystery or any coincidence that Namor is going to be have his heritage changed from being Atlantean into Aztec. But that's interesting too, because if you get on YouTube and look up the Emerald Tablet, you're gonna get the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Thoth was an Egyptian god. Go look the stuff up, man. I'm telling you, some very interesting stuff. Thank you all so much for being here today. Please make sure if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like it, please, you feel free to give it a thumbs down. It's okay, you're not gonna hurt my feelings. But also leave some comments down in the comments below. Let me know what you think about these theories. Does it make you wanna go out and, you know, form your own theories? Do you wanna get on, look up some more of this history and dig into some of these things yourself? I think it's very interesting. I think you should. I wanna know all your thoughts down in the comments below. If you're not already, please make sure you subscribe, click the little bell and all that good stuff. And yeah, we'll see you all in the next video. Later.